Security Council, and I should like to give the floor now to the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أضم صوتي بداية.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join my colleagues in expressing condolences to the people and government in Kindred, Indonesia, as a result of the disaster of that civilian aircraft. Mr. President, it is very much in bad taste that some delegations, Western delegations, are mixing politics and the humanitarian side of things. These delegations continue to set obstacles in the path of humanitarian access, which should be transparent, sincere, and non-politicized. These delegations claim that there will be no humanitarian action without responding to the strategic, ambitious designs of these countries. We have heard these same delegations set a number of political prior conditions that try to empty humanitarian action of all of its content and move it towards a political instrumentalization of the suffering of the Syrian people. Mr. President, I would like to recall that today's meeting is taking place or coincides with an attack committed by the so-called coalition against the Al Hajin region in Deir ez-Zor, using white phosphorus, which is internationally prohibited. This caused the death of an entire family, the mother, the father, and the children. The last meeting on the 24th of October coincided with a criminal terrorist attack perpetrated by armed groups in Idlib against Aleppo. This shelling saw the use of 40 missiles. Terrorist groups in Idlib launched 40 missiles against Aleppo, which killed dozens of people and injured dozens of civilians. On the 17th of September, coalition aircraft bombed Al-Susa and Bubadran in Deir ez-Zor, which led to the death of dozens of civilians as well. This was the session before last. All of that highlights and puts under a microscope the designs of the Western countries that have spoken about humanitarian needs in my country and who are attempting to manipulate OCHA, the United Nations Humanitarian Wing. Allow me, Mr. President, to congratulate you and through you, your country, the plurinational state of Bolivia, for the successful conduct of the work of the Security Council in October. Your presidency has genuinely taken care of the job entrusted to you by genuinely preserving, maintaining international peace and security and respecting the provisions of the Charter. Many member states of this organization are thus very proud of this excellent quality work done by the Bolivian mission. Mr. President, during the various meetings held recently between the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Mr. Lowcock, with Syrian officials, during those meetings, the need to coordinate common actions between the two parties for a better understanding and to remove obstacles and improve the role of the United Nations in the humanitarian sphere in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 46/182 governing OCHA. This need was confirmed at those meetings, and that in spite of a drop in the intensity of United Nations humanitarian action in Syria, which Mr. Lowcock spoke about, and a drop in financing due to unilateral coercive measures undertaken by the United States and the member states of the European Union against the Syrian people. And this demonstrates that tens of thousands of people need assistance due to these coercive measures, even though they say that the figures are quite different. The Syrian government is convinced of the importance of the role that its member states grant to the organization. Damascus continues to count on this role to help Syrians who have suffered from the terrorist war imposed upon my country, Syria. A role which will preserve the credibility and effectiveness of the organization, a role which would respect the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic. As your resolutions state, there are currently 28 political and humanitarian resolutions. They all confirm the need to preserve the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic and its people. A neutral, independent, objective role which does not chime with the blackmail of some countries is one that is based naturally on the Charter of the United Nations. Mr. President, we took note with very great interest of the briefing delivered by Mr. Lowcock and, of course, the report being considered. Allow me to make some remarks which will undoubtedly answer the questions from some colleagues. First of all, there is a vital need to conduct a transparent, objective, professional dialogue to modify the reporting mechanism concerning the humanitarian situation in Syria, so that the objective of these reports can genuinely be to provide assistance to the Syrians that need it. Continuing to submit these reports on a monthly basis is a waste of time, money, and human resources. We affirm that they should be replaced by quarterly reports to the extent that much of the information in these reports is outdated information. For example, in the report before us, we are looking at what took place 1 or 2 months ago, whereas we should really be considering what is taking place at the moment in the current month. Secondly, there is an urgent need to have a transparent, objective, professional discussion of the content of these reports so that they are not used by some to exert pressure and blackmail. It is not reasonable and it is in bad taste when everybody has understood that there is a terrible terrorist war going on in Syria this year and that the sponsoring of terrorist groups is considered to be the chief responsible for this. We do not need to speak before the Congress and the Senate, which this month published the latest, the chief of staff and so on. This is not necessary because you know all of this already. And so, after it has been established that the government sponsor and financing of these terrorist groups has been recognized, and this has been acknowledged by all, that these are armed terrorist groups which continue to take civilians as a human shield and which use hospitals and schools as a military base from which to launch their terrorist operations. Once everybody has understood that the source of lies targeting the Syrian government is terrorist groups and their champions, after all of that, it is then in bad taste for the authors of reports to continue to write their reports in a negative, politicized way against the Syrian Arab Republic and its institutions. All the more so because it makes many errors and deviates from its mandate and ignores deliberately the observations and remarks provided by the Syrian Arab Republic during previous reports to the Secretariat of the United Nations. 56 times we have presented formal responses to OCHA's reports. We have provided clear answers to all of the questions, but these comments were not relayed in OCHA's reports, never. For years, we have been trying to establish cooperation links with OCHA, and we ask OCHA for all of the necessary information, but our remarks do not attract the interest of OCHA officials. The remarks and observations from witnesses and the white helmets are relayed, but not the information provided by the Syrian government. Thirdly, it is surprising that the report claims that the government did not authorize the humanitarian convoy plan for September and October. What we heard today from Mr. Lowcock confirmed that, but the truth is that the government of my country asked the United Nations to include the liberated areas, which were included in the assistance plan as besieged or hard-to-reach areas. We asked for those areas to be included in the interagency convoy plan, in the humanitarian delivery plan, but the United Nations did not include these areas in the plan. I don't know what the answer to that is. You can ask Mr. Lowcock for that answer. Fourthly, when it comes to the delivery of assistance to Rukban camp, we know that it's, if my geographic information is correct, we know where it is, because some have spoken as though this were a camp in Somalia or the Maldives. But it's not. It's in Syria. I can confirm that the Syrian government has given its agreement to United Nations institutions to deliver assistance to the camp in cooperation with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and the ICRC directly, because it's on the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic. But the United Nations group, after approaching the 55th kilometer on the 26th of this month, returned to Damascus quickly because of the deterioration of the humanitarian situation and because, according to reports, an imminent Daesh attack was going to be perpetrated against the convoy from the zone controlled by the Americans. And this is even though the United States gave the United Nations assurances as to the security of the convoy for the delivery of this camp, which is in Somalia. This is proof that the United States is impeding the delivery of assistance to Rukban, and that is the source of the suffering. Daesh has moved towards Suwaida and has attacked and killed around 300 civilians at dawn. These terrorists came back from Suwaida to the Al-Tanf and Rukban area, which is in Somalia. Fifthly, my country regrets that the authors of the report, in accordance with the directive of some Western countries, are defending cross-border assistance, even though its ineffectiveness has been proven and it is not guaranteed that it will reach the destination of this assistance. And it also provides indirect assistance to terrorists who seize it and use it to fuel their terrorist activities in Syria. For months, we have been asking for many clarifications over this assistance and the assistance provided. We've still not received clarifications on that front. Mr. President, today, thanks to the safer, more stable situation on the ground and thanks to the victory over terrorism and thanks to the government's reconstruction of terrorist-destroyed areas and the return to normal life, the conditions are now in place for the voluntary return of Syrian refugees who had left their homeland due to terrorism and unilateral coercive measures which deprive them of their means of survival, of their livelihoods. The return of thousands of refugees from abroad is happening, even though Western countries are trying to prevent them from doing so by intimidating them with weak pretexts and using humanitarian concerns as a card to implement their geopolitical designs and setting that in between the political side and the humanitarian side. What we have heard today through from the delegation of some Western countries confirms this. Lastly, Mr. President, as we are writing the final chapter in the Syrian crisis, Syrians are determined to work together to do away with the effects of the terrorist war and to rebuild their country with their own hands and thanks to their own people and capacities, whether it be those who have stayed in the country or those who have been forced to leave it because of terrorism. As for what was said by some about Idlib, I would like to remind all of you that Idlib is a Syrian city. No one more than the Syrian government has concern for the city and its inhabitants. They have been taken as a human shield by terrorist groups. My country reaffirms the Sochi Agreement concluded on the 17th of September. The Syrian government will continue to facilitate all attempts to cease the spilling of Syrian blood. We welcome all initiatives to bring peace and security to all of the Syrian territory that has been struck by terrorism. My government reaffirms also that it will continue to combat terrorism until it liberates the last part of Syrian territory from the grip of terrorists and all foreign military presence which is present illegitimately on Syrian territory. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic